The psalmist writes, "The Lord is on my side. I will not fear. What can man do to me? The Lord is on my side as my helper. I shall look in triumph on those who hate me. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in man. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in princes." Sometimes I forget that I'm not alone in the world. I forget that I am not dealing with the things that I'm dealing with alone. I forget that there is a helper that I can find refuge and strength in. So I forget that and I become afraid. I become afraid of what other people might do to me. There's a lot of things that happen in this world. Men have done some terrible things, some frightening things, and people are terrified very often of what might happen to them, what people might do to me. The Lord is on my side, I will not fear. What can man do to me? Is the psalmist's question. Sometimes I become afraid because of how other people feel about me. There are people out there that may hate us and wish us ill and seek to exercise that hate through their speech and through their conduct toward us. The Lord is on my side as my helper. I shall look in triumph over those who hate me. I grew up in the middle of the Cold War, and we were constantly, as Americans, concerned about our national enemy. We were trained in school actually to prepare for the dropping of a nuclear bomb. That always made me kind of laugh. I was pretty sure that my desk was not going to help me if a nuclear bomb went off, but that's what they taught me to do, to curl up in a fetal position under the desk and find some safety from such things. We were in constant fear of such things. We were, as a nation, constantly building our armies and constantly building more weapons to offset those things. The Lord is on my side as my helper. I shall look in triumph over those who hate me. We don't need to fear what people may do to me or how people feel about us, or sometimes we even fear because we're not sure where we can find help when we get in over our head. I get in over my head all the time. I get in over my head as a spouse. I get in over my head as a parent. I may get in over my head as a parent more often than I do as a spouse. It's a frightening thing to have the obligation to raise up children in the fear and admonition of God, knowing that you're going to stand before God and answer for the way in which you do that work. And there are days when you just don't know what to do. You don't know what to say. You don't know how to address the problem. You feel like you're the only person that's ever gone through it, and there's no one that you can turn to for help. I don't need to fear about that. It's better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in man. It's better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in princes. My fellow man is not the one who is there to bail me out. My government is not the one who is there to bail me out. My God is the one who is there as a help. The Lord is on my side. He is my helper. He is my refuge. And we should remember that fact. We should remember that fact every day of our lives. We should remember that as we face the trials and difficulties of life. And they are many, and they are great, and they are varied, and they will come in ways that we are not prepared to deal with. And sometimes they'll get the better of us. But we need to remember, be still, my soul. The Lord is on thy side. Bear patiently the cross of grief and pain. Leave to thy God to order and provide. In every change he faithful will remain. Be still, my soul, the best, thy heavenly friend, through thorny ways leads to a joyful end. Those are the words of, I think her name is Katharina von Schlegel. in a hymn that bears the title, at least I think it bears the title in our book, Be Still My Soul. The whole point of that verse is to remind us that the Lord is on our side, to remind us to therefore bear patiently the crosses of grief and pain. Remember that it is God who is ordering things. Remember that it is God who will provide. Remember that in every change of life, He is faithful. He is there. He will be there. He will remain there. That He is our heavenly friend through thorny ways. And He will lead us to our joyful end. In Joshua chapter 1 and verse 5, as Joshua was preparing to take over the leadership of the nation of Israel, he was told this, "No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you." I really can't imagine the pressure or the perplexity and complexity of the problems that place themselves at the feet of the men who function as leaders of the nations of this earth. I can't imagine what it's like to wake up and realize that there are millions of people that are affected by the things that you say and do. And that if you do the wrong thing, you can affect them irreparably. I don't know what that pressure feels like. I probably will never know what that pressure feels like. I do know what it feels like to wake up in a house where there's 5 other people that are relying upon you for guidance and for strength and for help. And that's terrifying enough. So Joshua was told here by God, don't be afraid. Just like I was with Moses, I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. And I would submit to you that Joshua doesn't have an advantage over any of us. In the 37th Psalm, the psalmist says, "The steps of man are established by the Lord." This is starting in the 23rd verse of Psalm 37. "The steps of man are established by the Lord when he delights in his way. Though he fall, he shall not be cast headlong, for the Lord upholds his hand." Yes, we may fall, we may stumble, we may have difficulties happen to us as we go across the paths of this life, but God is there. God has our hand. "I have been young, and now I am old. Yet I have not seen the righteous forsaken, or his children begging for bread," the psalmist says. Be still, my soul. The Lord is on thy side. That's what the psalmist is writing. That I don't have to worry about how to bear the cross of grief and pain, or how to receive my provisions, or how to deal with the challenges and thorny ways that life presents, because God is there. And if I trip and fall, I'm not going to be cast headlong. I'm not going to fall to my death, because God is there and He will pick me up again. He will make certain that I have the things that I need. That's what the psalmist is telling us. 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 8, "We are afflicted in every way," Paul wrote, "but not crushed." It doesn't matter what way we're talking about, and there are manifold ways in which afflictions will come, and he says we are afflicted in every way, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not in despair. Problems are big and they're complicated, and life is big and it's complicated, and we may not know what ought to be done or how to do it or what ought to be said. We're perplexed by the whole thing. We're perplexed as to why we should do one thing over another when we read about it in the Word of God. I don't understand why He commanded this. I don't understand why that's not okay. I don't understand why I must do it this way. We're perplexed about so many things as parents. In terms of the things that our children are growing up and facing, and how to address them, and when to tell them, and how to tell them, and how to help them, and how to make them feel comfortable to come to you with their problems. We're perplexed, but not driven to despair. Persecuted, but not forsaken. Be still, my soul. The Lord is on thy side. Bear patiently the cross of grief and pain. Leave to thy God to order and provide. In every change he will faithful remain. That's what Paul, by inspiration, is writing to the church at Corinth. He says that we are persecuted but not forsaken, struck down but not destroyed, always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be manifest in our bodies. Remembering what Christ did for us on the cross. Carrying about that so that also the life of Jesus might be manifest in us. The hope of Jesus, the hope of the resurrection, the hope of heaven. And so in Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 5, for anyone that doubts that the promise made to Joshua applies to us, the Hebrew writer says, keep your life free from the love of money and be content with what you have, for he has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. You don't have to be concerned and anxious about life because God is by your side. That's the promise of these passages. The second verse of Miss von Schlegel's hymn says, be still, my soul, thy God doth undertake. And so we learn at the outset that verse 2 is about what God is doing. The things that he is undertaking to do. Be still, my soul, thy God doth undertake to guide the future as he has the past. Thy hope, thy confidence, let nothing shake. All now mysterious shall be bright at last. Be still, my soul, the waves and winds still know his voice who ruled them when he dwelt below. You remember that story, right? We can read about it in Mark chapter 4. Mark chapter 4, starting in verse 36, the scriptures say, and leaving the crowd, they took him with them into the boat, just as he was. And other boats were with them, and a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat. Now, listen, that's frightening. I don't know if you've ever been in a boat on the water when a storm rises. But I'm going to tell you, when the water's coming up over the edge of the boat and the boat begins to fill up with water, it is very uncomfortable. And that's what's being described here. The waves were breaking into the boat so that the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern asleep on a cushion. And they woke him and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we're perishing? And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said to them, Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith? Thy hope, thy confidence, let nothing shake. All now mysterious shall be bright at last. Be still, my soul. The waves and winds still know his voice who ruled them when he dwelt below. That's what she's talking about. When God dwelt among us in the flesh, and he said to the wind and the waves, Peace, be still, and they stopped at his command, they still know his voice. And they still listen. And if he can control the wind and the waves, what about this life can he not control? Mark chapter 4 and verse 41 follows up that story with this. They were filled with great fear and said to one another, Who then is this that even the wind and sea obey him? Who is this? We know the answer to that, don't we? He is God with us. Verse 3 goes on to say, Be still, my soul, the hour is hastening on. It's speeding toward us, this hour that she has under consideration. Well, what is she talking about? When we shall be forever with the Lord. Death is coming. It's hastening. It's coming to every one of us. We're getting closer to it every single day. I was thinking just before I got up here that in 50 years, if the world is still here, most of us will not be. There are a few small ones that will still be around if the Lord blesses them with normal lives, but most of us will be gone. The hour is hastening on. We shall forever be with the Lord. We shall be off of this earth. So when disappointment, grief, and fear are gone, that's what happens when the world comes to an end. Sorrow forget, love's purest joy is restored. She says, be still my soul when change and tears are past. All safe and blessed, oh, we shall meet at last. The idea of being able to meet the Lord, see Him, be in His presence. At that time when fear is gone and grief is gone and sorrow is gone and joy, true, pure joy is restored to our souls. That day, do you notice that the way in which death is looked at here is not negative? We fear death, don't we? Be still, my soul. The Lord is on thy side. Those that belong to Christ need not fear death. And so as it is when Paul wrote to the church at Philippi in chapter 1 and verse 21, he says, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. When I read that, I realize that if I don't feel that way, my faith isn't what it ought to be. It isn't to the level that it can be. Because I can feel those things. To live is Christ, but to die is gain. If I am to live on in the flesh, it means fruitful labor for me. Yet which I shall choose, I cannot tell. He went on to write, I'm hard pressed between the two. My desire is to depart and be with Christ, for that is far better. Unfortunately, most days that I'm alive on the earth, I have not reached that level. My faith is not to where I'm hard pressed between the two. I can easily choose to live over death. I have work to do. Revelation chapter 14 and verse 13, we are told this, I heard a voice from heaven saying, so that you make no mistake, this is the voice of God. It's coming out of heaven. We know exactly who's talking. Write this, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Blessed indeed, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, for their deeds follow them. I don't need to fear death. I don't need to fear what will happen when I die. I'm blessed. It's rest. In John 14, the Lord said, let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go and prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. Be still, my soul, when change and tears are past, all safe and blessed. Oh, we shall meet at last. The Lord taking me to be with Him. We spend far too much of our life in fear. We spend far too much of our life anxious about tomorrow. We spend far too much of our lives afraid of dying. We spend far too much of our lives afraid of sickness. We spend far too much of our lives afraid. Period. Maybe you're afraid. Maybe you don't know what will happen to you. Maybe you feel confused. Maybe you feel inadequate. There's a reason for that, by the way. When I feel confused and inadequate, it's because I haven't listened to God and because I'm relying upon myself, and I am inadequate. Maybe you fear death. Take refuge in the Lord. Be still, my soul. The Lord is on my side. Take refuge in Jesus, in His strength. Strength doesn't arise from within man. Strength arises from God. Strength doesn't arise from the ideas of man. Strength arises from the ideas of God. Strength doesn't arise through the solutions that man come up with. Strength arises from God. Take refuge in His power. The power that created the world and all things that are in it, that simply said, "Let it be," and it was. "Let there be light," and there was light. He spoke and the earth was. He spoke and the waters separated from the land. He spoke and there was plants growing on the land. He spoke and there were fishes in the water and birds in the air. He spoke and there were creeping things on the ground. And then He formed man from the dust of the earth and breathed life into man. That's where power comes from, not from myself, not from men, not from princes, not from armies, from God. Take refuge in His power. Take refuge in His promises. Anxiety, confusion, inadequacy, that's what comes from the promises of men. That's what comes from my own mind. That's what comes from others' minds. Promises of God, however, are something much greater. Promises of God is, "I will never leave you nor forsake you. You are not alone." The promise of God is, when you fall, I'm there. I have your hand. I'll lift you up. The promise of God is, when you die, that's not the end. You'll be raised. The promise of God is, "I have gone to prepare a place for you, that where I am, there you may be also." And then He asked this question: if it were not so, why would I tell you that I've gone to prepare a place for you? Take refuge in His hope. We have no hope in ourselves. We have hope in Him. Philippians chapter 4 and verse 11, "I have learned in whatever situation I am in to be content. I know how to be brought low and how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hungry." I want you to realize what is being said here, that the challenges of life, that the perplexities of life, that the difficulties of life, they're to be found when you're low and when you're high. They're to be found when you have a bunch of stuff and when you have nothing. In any and every circumstance, He says, "I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need." Problems, questions, anxiety, fear, it isn't solved by the things that we collect of this world. A big bank account doesn't make it go away. Food on the table doesn't make it go away. A house doesn't make it go away. If I only had this, then I would feel secure. Nope. I have learned the secret in whatever situation I am in to be content. How? Verse 13. "I can do all things through Him who strengthens me." Be still, my soul. The Lord is on my side. I will not put my confidence in men or in wealth or in princes, but in God. That's the message. I'll leave you with the opening of the 46th Psalm, if you want to turn over there and read along with me. The psalmist says this: God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth gives way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling. It doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter if the earth itself begins to convulse and disappear from under our feet. God is our refuge. God is our strength. God is our help, and He's very present. And He's there in times of trouble. Now, I will mention this. Doesn't always feel that way. We've talked in recent weeks and made mention of Elijah. You'll recall that he had fought against Ahab and against Jezebel and against the idolatry that Jezebel had brought into the land. And Jezebel had had all the prophets killed. And there's Elijah, the lone prophet of God that's left. And he challenges the prophets of Baal, and he wins, and he kills them all. And Jezebel finds out, and Jezebel says, the sun will not set on this day until he's dead. And this great prophet of God forgets that God is on his side. And he forgets that his refuge is God, and he forgets that his hope is God, and he forgets that he doesn't need to fear what man might do to him, and he becomes afraid because Jezebel is out to have his life. And he runs out by himself into the wilderness, and he sits down under a tree, and he says to God, just take my life. I'm alone. You know what God said? Be still your soul. I'm with you. And you're not alone. And you have things yet to do. So get up and do what I told you to do. That is not recorded for Elijah's benefit. That's recorded for our benefit. Because the same is true for each one of us and for the life in which we live. I don't know what a day will bring forth. I don't know what tomorrow brings. I don't know what will come. But I know that as long as the Lord gives me life and He puts me in this world, that He expects me to embrace Him, to walk with Him, to live His will, to speak His word, and to seek others, that they may come to Him and find life, that they may come to Him and find hope, that they may come to Him and find the strength that animates me. And on those days when I wake up and I get afraid, and I start worrying about what might happen to me or what someone might do or say to me, or whether I'll be successful or not successful, or whether I'll be able to pay the bills or not pay the bills, or whatever things that we worry about in life, when that happens, that's when I need to sit down and remember what the psalmist said. That's when I need to sit down and remember what God said to Moses and to Joshua and to me and to you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. I need to remember that at His voice, when He says, be calm and still to the winds and the waves of the storm, the earth obeys His word. And it still knows His voice, and it still responds to His voice. And so should I. Peace. Be still. Know that I'm God. Know that I'm with you. Know that I am protecting you. know that, though you may not get out of this alive, and by the way, none of us will. None of us will get out of this world alive. I'm there. And I'll bring you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. I don't know what your problems are. I don't know what your questions are. I don't know what your perplexities are, or what you're facing, or what your doubts, or what your fears are. But I know as certainly as I have them, you do too. And I know the same solution is there for all of us. If you're at that place and you're tired of fighting against the storms, you're tired of fighting against your enemies, you're tired of the daily struggle of life, you have the opportunity to repent, to turn to God, to return to Him. He will receive you. He will wrap you into His arms. He will place the best robes on you. He will place His signet ring on your hand. He will celebrate your return home. And He will never leave you or forsake you.